Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World, the Practical Voice Podcast. Now, hopefully, if all goes to plan, you'll be hearing this on a Friday. So happy Friday, boys and girls. And welcome to our guests for this, I want to say, special episode. It's kind of a special episode because for two reasons. One is that we are welcoming our very first ever returning guest to VUX World, founder and chief executive of Voice XP, Bob Stalzberg. Bob, welcome back.
Wow, thank you so much. It's great to be back, Kane. I hope to add a lot of value to your listeners.
It is a pleasure to have you back because, as I say, very first returning guest on the podcast, which is absolutely amazing. And we also have a fellow voice expert and founder and principal of voicecraft.ai, Roger Kibbe. Roger, welcome.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be on the podcast and offer some value and talk today.
And as ever, we are joined by Dustin Coates. Hello there, Dustin.
Hey, Kane, it's a pleasure. And I want to say Roger's not just a voice expert, but on the theme of today's podcast, he's a voice winner as well, voice champion with the Bixby showcase. So congratulations, Robert. Congratulations, Roger.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Samsung had a contest for best Bixby capsule. And the finals were at the Samsung Developers Conference last week. And indeed, I did win. So looking forward to talking about Bixby today.
Indeed, and that is what we are going to discuss. And afterwards, we're going to all be going for a drink because Roger's prize for that was about $10,000, wasn't it?
It was indeed. So I guess I owe a lot of drinks.
And one for each listener. So there'll be no left after that.
I don't know how many listeners you have and where are we buying the drinks?
Well, that's all to be decided beyond the show. I think that we've got an international audience, so we might have to do this kind of remotely. But congratulations on that, and with everything that you've been doing with VoiceCraft. We've got to mention VoiceCraft there, actually. By the way, we might get into a little bit of that as we go through. And Roger, you touched on what we'll be talking about today, which is Bixby. So Bixby have opened up their developer portal, and there's been a huge kind of swathe of content over the course of the week, all talking about Bixby and what it all is and what it means for the voice scene and for developers and designers and brands and things like that. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And today I will hand over the reins to Dustin, who will take it from here. So over to you, Dustin.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. We're going to get a little technical in this podcast, but don't worry if you're not a developer. Kane also comes from the non-developer side of it, so Kane, pull us back if we get a little bit too in the weeds for sure. But thanks, guys. You both were active in the Bixby beta program, obviously, Roger, with winning the whole thing. Roger, can you tell us actually what you built?
Yeah, so my capsule was called What Bin? And it's really about letting people recycle and compost better. I think we've all had the experience where you have something in hand, you go, and there's a compost bin, a recycle bin, and a trash bin. And it's, kind of a little bit of panic sets in. What do I put it in? Right? You probably put too much in the trash and not the right things in the recycle or compost bin. So in one sense, very simple. Simply ask Bixby, can I recycle this? Can I compost? Can I trash this? Or what bin? There's also some educational content about the value of recycling, composting, and some information about alternative ways to recycle items that otherwise you couldn't put curbside. But yeah, it's a simple thing that I think is a really voice-first solution that makes a ton of sense for voice.
And so for those people who haven't used Bixby before, what does the user flow look like compared to a Google Assistant or a Siri on the phone there?
Yeah, so, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but one thing that's unique about Bixby is that there's no invocation word. So with Google and Amazon, you have to say open, skill or action of your choice, or ask skill or action of your choice. With Bixby, you just use your phrase and it answers. So it's just like a native capability that Samsung would build in. That's really interesting. I think that's going to be super challenging to get working and mediate among different capsules. but it fundamentally means you just go and ask. You write your capsule, you write a phrase, and then you just invoke Bixby, which you can do. You can say hi Bixby on the phone. There's a little button. There's a dedicated button on the Note 9 there, and ask it your question right away. So that's a fundamental difference. But I think a lot of the interaction is pretty similar, right? I mean, it's a voice assistant. You're asking it a question, and there's a back and forth till you get your right answer.
So to invoke your capsule, how would someone speak to Bixby in that case?
So right now, Bixby, or the Bixby we're talking about, which is the new Bixby. There's an old Bixby too, but we'll get into that. It's only on the Note 9, and so on the Note 9, I can turn on, just like I can turn on an Android phone, "Hey Google." There's the equivalent phrase, which is "Hi Bixby," and then interact with it. There's also a dedicated button on the side that when you press it, Bixby starts learning. Now this is going to get, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about the plethora of devices and the hundreds of millions of devices that Samsung ships yearly, which they intend to embed Bixby into. Obviously, they're going to have to figure out how that works. Is it going to be Hi Bixby for all of those? Is it going to be a button? Is there another way to invoke it?
And Bob, you built something as well, right? What did you build for the beta?
Yeah, absolutely. Voice XP is an experienced development agency and platform in creating voice experiences. And we've done things with Alexa and Google Assistant. And we work with enterprise businesses. And so Samsung invited us to be part of the early adopter program. And we created 2 capsules. One of them was a game for families to encourage communication, and it asks questions and facilitates conversation. And the other capsule was what we call a voice website, and that's where you could ask for information about a specific company. And the capsule we put up was about Voice XP, so you could say, tell me about the customers, tell me about the company, the leadership team, why would I need a voice website or a voice experience, and how do I contact them? So it's a new way to engage using voice first, and we're really proud of the development that we put up.
Great. And then I know, speaking with the two of you earlier preparing for this podcast, Bob, I think actually the both of you are pretty bullish on Bixby. You work with a lot of brands. Why should they care about Bixby? Samsung often is an afterthought, and it seems without the invocation names that branding might be difficult. What's in it for brands to be on the platform?
Well, I think brands should look at the voice platforms the same way they do social media platforms, in that you need to have a presence on the Instagrams, Facebooks, Twitters, etc., the same way you would need to have a presence on Alexa, Google Assistant, or Bixby. Why Bixby is different, I believe, is because of their hardware footprint and their OEM provider partnerships that are going to extend voice beyond a personal assistant device. That's how Amazon's really led the market so far, is by getting market penetration with the Echo line of products. And, the next evolution of voice is ubiquitous and talking to things like your washing machine, toaster oven, your shower head, etc. All these different devices. And Samsung's going to be in a position, unlike Alexa, Amazon, or Google, to get people talking. And it's brands and businesses just need to be in all of these different places to meet the consumer where they are and play with the personal assistant, or in Samsung Bixby's case, the intelligent assistant. You need to be in all those places.
Can I just add on, and I strongly share with Bob the idea that brands need to be jumping onto voice right now and understanding how it's going to work and how they're going to interact with their customers, and what's the right voice presence versus your mobile presence versus your app presence versus your web presence, etc. I also think it's really a powerful point of the kind of post smart speaker role. See, Samsung's going to be embedding these in all these appliances that you have at home. That takes it away from the smart speaker, And I think it's going to introduce a whole new set of new audience to voice assistants. And that's going to be powerful and interesting and going to bring the industry forward.
Dean, what about you? Would you ever speak to your shower head?
I probably would, actually, because there's something wrong with my shower at the moment and I can't get it to cool down. It's just absolutely boiling hot, so maybe I would to try and cool it down. But I think that what I'd be interested in knowing is, because obviously Android phones, Samsung run on Android, don't they? All the Samsung phones run Android, so there's kind of maybe a little bit of competition with Google Assistant potentially. But so I don't know whether or not we want to get into that or not. But what about the general adoption in general of Bixby? So obviously they've got loads of devices all over the place. What do you see, or how do you see the adoption of Bixby playing out, given the kind of market share and kind of top of mind dominance of the other two, particularly Alexa and Google Assistant?
I'm going to go first, Roger?
Okay, yeah, I'll take it, and then please add on and expand. So I'm going to 500 million devices. That's how many devices Samsung ships yearly. And most, if not all of those, are going to be Bixby enabled by 2020, or that's their ambitious plans. I mean, that's stupendous. And you look at the market share, you think about smart TVs. I don't know, I don't have the stats in front of me, but Samsung is number one, and they eclipse something like the number 2 through 6 in total sales. And so it's just the sheer amount of devices that they can put this on means they can go from relatively, and I wouldn't say small market share because they're on all the Samsung phones, although not the latest Bixby, to this kind of massive market share. And that's a huge, huge opportunity there that you can't afford to ignore. They're going to go from, they can press the accelerator as fast or faster than anyone else in the industry because of their just sheer magnitude of devices shipped.
Yeah, I'll add that it's also global. They're predominantly in the Asia Pacific regions, but they ship so many devices, and their OEM partnerships where people will take a Samsung electronic device and put their brand or logo on it is massive. And I just believe, like Roger does, that with the global footprint, the mobile phone segment that they're after is huge. We saw a recent report from VoiceBot.ai that said that voice personal assistant usages on smartphones is only dramatically increasing. And so I think, Samsung's just in a really good position with their partnerships to roll this out. And I think them coming into the market now is really good timing. And it also makes me feel that it's still early. What excites me about Samsung that's different than Amazon is the fact that you'll be able to integrate so many devices in your house because smart home adoption is growing like wildfire as well. And you'll be able to set these neat routines that, if you say good morning, it will start your shower, turn it to a specific temperature degree, start your coffee, and then tune in on your favorite audio stream, while you're getting ready. So I'm excited about the possibilities that Bixby brings with the integrations.
Can I just add on that? I think it's worth mentioning that Samsung owns another division called SmartThings, which is a home automation hub. And so, what you're talking about, that good morning routine would tie directly into not only Bixby, but using SmartThings as a mediator among all those different disparate devices. We talked about appliances, and I think there's something super exciting. You were making the joke about your shower head, but think of the kitchen. I actually think the kitchen is such an amazing untapped place for voice. I know Amazon's coming out with their microwave that's voice controlled, which I'm pretty actually excited about because it's showing the future of how it should be. I love to cook. I should be able to go into the kitchen, ask for a recipe, and the oven knows that it needs to go to 400 degrees. And you know what? When I open the door and close it, set a timer for 20 minutes and do that, or my microwave or any of my other appliances. And really, hey, the biggest cooking day of the year is coming up next Thursday, right? Thanksgiving. And it's a big challenge for people. Imagine if you have this really smart assistant in there helping you along the way, setting things, proactively setting timers, telling you when to do what. That would be super amazing. That's like having an assistant sous chef in the kitchen. I love the use case of voice in the kitchen.
Yeah, and you both bring up. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
You gave me the idea. What if you could download a voice experience that's Gordon Ramsay walking you through how to cook something in your kitchen, and he's yelling at you, and it's fun, you know?
Awesome personality.
Yeah. You guys both touch on this as one of the Samsung's real differentiators, and listener and friend of the podcast, James Poulter, also asked this question to us as well. As what is Samsung's perspective, if you guys know this, on interoperability with other Android-based systems, with like smartphones, with SmartThings? Can I start over and
yeah, go on. Yeah.
Okay.
If you just pause for like a minute, so I know where the gap is, and I'll come back and edit that.
All right. So you guys both touch on something really interesting, which is sort of Samsung's integration with everything that you're working with in the home, with the phone, with TVs, etc. And the podcast listener and friend of the podcast, James Poulter, asked this question to us as well, which is, what is Samsung's perspective on this interoperability? Do they provide developer tools to reach into SmartThings to control the phone as well? Is that something that they allow third-party developers to leverage?
Yeah, it's super easy to get started. And for more information, just visit bixbydevelopers.com. I believe Samsung wants to, every business to integrate Bixby into their product line. So they make it, the tools, the code, the documentation, the support contacts, everything's available through bixbydevelopers.com. What's really different is that Bixby comes with a software suite, an IDE, to program everything. So some developers who are used to IDEs will find working with it really simple. Roger, do you have anything to add about integrations with other things?
With Android and as well. So clearly SmartThings. I think they're early, right? So this question came up at their developers conference about tying all these together. They definitely want to do that, right? And for sure they're going to do it with SmartThings. And be able to control Android. I think there was another question somewhere about NFC, which I thought was a fascinating question around, can I integrate a voice assistant with NFC capabilities? And my mind went off on kind of crazy and wild ideas of what you could do there. Not all that's available yet, but I'm sure it's going to happen. As far as interoperability with things like the other assistants, Google Assistants, I'm going to make a crazy, wild, bold prediction and probably be proven wrong, that the plethora of voice assistants is kind of going to get out of control, and we're going to come to some more common lingua franca that's going to make it easier to develop capabilities that work across all these voice assistants, or the voice assistants know how to mediate between each other and who to ask for the right question for. We're probably a ways off there, but I just think the marketplace is going to demand that, because it's just too hard to build for all these competing platforms. So more of a web-like open platform for voice. So that's my bold, crazy, wacky prediction of the day.
Great.
I'll want to quickly add, one of the other finalists in the Bixby Developer Showcase for their Samsung Developer Conference was a really cool capsule that allowed you to bring up a live camera stream. And this was just an off-the-shelf camera that had a standard video stream that a developer wrote, some Java code to simply reach into that stream and display it on a Samsung phone, in real time. So the integrations are pretty simple. You can just work with stuff that's off the shelf, clearly documented. There's nothing proprietary about it. And I think that gives people a lot of cool flexibility to tie into their existing technology and solutions to access them through Bixby.
Great. And Bob, you mentioned something earlier I want to go back to. This is a question that comes up a lot, and Sam Warner's asked us to ask this as well, is that the designing for Bixby takes a little getting used to because there's a different philosophy. You mentioned you have to use the Bixby IDE, and there's other differences as well. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's designing for a different philosophy. It's just a different way of doing stuff. If you work with Alexa, there's different portals that you'll have to log into. There's different ways to publish this stuff. Maybe you'll need different services. With Bixby, it feels like it's all built in. And what I mean by that is they've got a software suite you run, an IDE, and that's where you go to load templates, put your code in there. It's got a testing suite built in so that you can, see how things are going to look on the variety of Samsung devices. And from there, you can publish it, and you can publish your capsule to the marketplace and get things live. I think what the philosophy that's different is in the natural language processing and how that is implemented within Bixby. I don't think it was difficult to do at all. You just, I read the documentation, I followed some examples, but it was just different than how you would write something for an Alexa skill. I'd also say that the code base, it feels like it's much, you've got much more reusability possibilities with Bixby, because if you've already got some stuff written, it's pretty easy to implement it. You shouldn't have to write anything new. And sometimes I've had to for logic with Google Assistant or putting something in an Alexa Lambda function. I don't think I would just say there's always a learning curve for any new technology. Getting our feet wet with Bixby only took a day or two, and we were off to the races. It was a matter of just using the IDE, going to Bixby developers, and connecting with some other great resources like Roger on Slack and Twitter that wanted to share.
When you say IDE, that's been mentioned a few times. For those that aren't kind of developers and stuff amongst the listeners, what does IDE mean?
So it's an integrated development environment. So there's a whole, instead of it's a download. So unlike Alexa and Google, where you're basically building in the cloud or using your programmer's editor of choice locally, there's a whole programmer's editor and suite that you use to build for Bixby. Can I expand a little bit on Bob's comment? And so Bixby is very model driven versus code driven. And if I look at the voice assistants, and I built for both Google and Amazon, Alexa is very code driven. You write a lot of code. Most of what you do is controlled by that code. Google's somewhere in the middle, because I go in Dialogflow and I set up a bunch of configuration and then write probably a little less code. Bixby is on that kind of far right, where I write a lot more. There's a lot more model. So it's a really model-driven framework. I model these objects. I model these actions. I glue them together with this modeling meta language. And then I end up writing very little code, actually. And so it's a really different philosophical framework. And I think it's one of the places where people coming from the other voice assistants get a little tangled up. Certainly I did, because I had to sit and go, well, I just want to write this in code, right? That's the way I'm used to doing it. It's like, no, you need to model it. You need to think about it. I actually think that's it builds a level of discipline into what you're building, and lets you leverage some of the built-in features in an easier way. Because it takes that model and that natural language training that you create, and then auto-generates a bunch of code. And then creates this really kind of super cool, I'll call it an explain plan for people who are old database people know what I'm talking about. For NLU in program execution, you see this amazing graph of everything that's happening. And that was really good, one, because model-driven frameworks sometimes are real black boxes. But Bixby does a really good job of showing you what that black box is doing. And through that explain plan, and then I can tweak it to make it do different things. So it's a nice balance between make it all model driven versus code driven. I still have the control, but I'm still model driven. It's definitely different philosophically from other voice assistants that I built, and requires a little bit of a leap of faith and understanding. Once you get it, it makes sense.
Roger, what's an example of something you would do in the model-driven space versus the code-driven space for Alexa? Like, what are the differences in implementing that?
Yeah, so in Alexa, right, I'm going and creating my intent. So I go and ask and create my utterances and intents in there, and it's all based on the kind of the NLU part of the training, right? And then I write all of my code that basically after it goes through Amazon's ASR and NLU, and then it passes me relevant data, and then all my code to actually handle that, and then the other side, the output, the natural language generation, is code that I actually write. Whereas Bixby, so if you're going into write a Bixby, first you model all of your input. Here's my input objects, and and you model all of your output there, and then you model actions. So when I get this input, what happens? And included in there is things like validations and some capabilities around personalization that maybe we'll get into on there. And here's my output. And then I write a little bit of glue JavaScript. Really their idea with the JavaScript code or the node code is to call a third-party API, get the results back, and then shove that into those objects and let that framework do all its magic. So there's this incredible, fairly complicated kind of markup language there that has a lot of behavior built in that otherwise, certainly with Alexa, I would be writing that behavior in just, probably Node.js or one of the other languages that you can write Alexa development in. Like I said, Google's somewhere in the middle because Dialogflow offers some of those capabilities, but Bixby's on that far end of one of the spectrums.
Does this then open up more of the development to non-technical VUI designers?
That's a good question. It opens up, so I was thinking about this exact question. It opens up, so if you've done, I don't think there's a lot of people left over this kind of like, I'm an object modeler, but I don't write code. Right, that would appeal to those people because there's a lot of that there. I think some of that modeling is more understandable. Now, right now, the challenge is that you're still there's a markup language, a Bixby specific markup language for that modeling. And although it's simpler than code, it's still, I'll call it code-like. And there's an expression language with if statements and else and things like that. So you got that coding there. I know they're working on more of a kind of wizard template-driven capabilities in their developer studio, and so maybe that will open up. I think that once it's written, you could stick that in front of a VUI designer, and they would have a better idea of what a Bixby capsule does and underlying logic than you might otherwise, because of that kind of that meta level. Markup language, which is definitely a lot easier to understand than understanding Node or Java or Python for sure.
I want to dovetail into what Roger's saying, and I believe that Bixby's going to open up opportunity for people that are new to voice and are familiar with a more web-centric user experience. For example, Bixby by default and the way it runs on most devices is multimodal out of the box, and the way you control the display is basically HTML. It's, editing with some div tags, and so I found it much easier to put things on a screen with Bixby than some of the other assistants out there. Roger, do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, it is way easier, right? You can definitely see there is some kind of I'll call it chatbot roots that you can see in Bixby, but it's much easier to control the display and much more powerful, which points to it being now, right, on the phones. right? And that, but I thought that was really, really nice, because some of the competition has made that hard, although they're working on opening some of those things up and giving more UI control.
And I'll just add to that. I think it feels like with Bixby, it's not all voice. You can implement other pieces of code to get things done, and it's not like you have to go learn a new tool and become a voice expert to use it. If you're just trying to create something simple where with questions and answers, and you've already got an API endpoint set up for that, it's super easy to implement without having to really design a whole conversation around it. And I think some of the other voice platforms out there, and the ones that are and other ones that are emerging, are so heavy on conversation design, and that you've got to come and learn this new voice trade and technology to get something implemented. And people that are coming from an old web world, I think this will be a really good and easier transition for them.
Can I just back up on what you were saying there, Bob, in terms of the multimodal aspect? Because this is what Stefania Massi was asking us as well, was about multimodal design. You mentioned that it's essentially HTML markup. Is that what you use to create the visual display to accompany things? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
All right. That's interesting.
Yeah, HTML. I'll just add HTML markup there, and then it has some of the traditional, I'll call it the chat body things like cards that are pretty familiar if you've ever done, for instance. Google offers that too for their chatbot interfaces. So both, which is powerful. You can use kind of the easy template cards and card type markup, or you can get more precise and use HTML markup. It's very rich in the multimodal side, which is which is really nice. I'll just say it was a pleasure when it went to go and design a UI. It was I was like, oh, this is so familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Both of you touched on this, Roger. You mentioned the sort of the chatbots ancestry, you can say. And Bob, you mentioned that it's more than just voice. Do you think this experience is going to struggle at all once it moves to that voice-only environments with the rumored smart speakers and the washing machines and the refrigerators?
No.
Simple enough.
Yeah,
I don't think in the future, more devices like washing machines, everything will have a button you push, just like on your cell phone, right? Whether it's Siri or you have a Samsung, you press the button to talk to Bixby. Devices will have that. The little blue light will come on, and then you talk to it.
I agree. I think that the multimodal capabilities are additive to the base NLU, NLG capabilities that are inherent in the platform. So, as long as you're designing well for, a conversational voice only experience, it'll work fine.
And so, changing topics a little bit, I want to ask the both of you, moving forward, you're both big fans of Bixby. You're both very bullish on the platform. Are you going to start building on Bixby, or are you going to still focus on the other platforms and move over to Bixby when you can?
Well, I'll take this one if it's okay, Roger. We're really bullish on Bixby because we're voice agnostic. We focus on our customer and solving business problems using voice. And the feedback from some of the enterprise businesses that we've worked with, and some of our customers include Hallmark and CenturyLink, Banner Health, Mercy, Arizona State University, TiVo. Some household names. A lot of these, not picking on the ones I mentioned, but a lot of enterprise businesses we talk to are threatened by Amazon. And a lot of businesses feel that they're in competition with them. And when you compare that to, well, how do you feel about Samsung? Oh, that's just a hardware company. So I believe that businesses, because Bixby was just released, are looking to Samsung, and some of our customers have wanted to have conversations with them. But I believe overall, from a business standpoint, they have that as an advantage over Amazon and even Google because they don't have competition with their businesses.
Can I just add on to that? Because I have a deep background in retail and retail tech. And certainly in retail, there's a deep, fear and distrust of Amazon. And you can see that. For instance, eBay and Walmart have no Alexa skill, although they have Google Assistant actions available. And I don't, that's their own business decision to do that. But, if Amazon is certainly in retail and other businesses is seen as a competitor and questions about there, Google's an interesting place. Everybody writes a large check to Google. Yet there's a little bit of a fear of kind of disintermediation of my customer data that happens with Google. But I totally agree with Bob. Samsung, they create hardware. Their core business is hardware. Their core business is not customer data or trying to establish an e-commerce presence like Amazon. So they're in a different kind of non-competitive area versus the other big voice assistants. And so I can see them being very attractive to businesses to jump on without those competitive considerations being in play.
And do you think that, so every sort of voice assistant so far tends to kind of like have a speciality almost, doesn't it? So Google is obviously very good at kind of search. Alexa seems to be more towards kind of like smart home or kind of like engagement and interactive stories and games or whatever. I know they both do the same kind of stuff more or less, but there's a bit of a kind of distinction almost in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And then you got Microsoft, which is more on the kind of enterprise, helping you get stuff done at work and stuff like that. Do you see Bixby having a specific niche or a specific focus, or is it also similar to Google Assistant and Alexa in terms of it trying just to be a completely wide open general assistant?
I think I think it's generally wide open assistant that they want to be, your personal assistant that you interact with day to day for whatever you need to be. I think, I think you listen to what Samsung talks a lot about Bixby. They are definitely interested in conversational commerce and transactions because a lot of the capabilities and their marketing materials talk about that. So that's maybe indicative of where the company internally wants to build up those capabilities. But there's nothing, the platform is open and you can build anything on the platform that is within the realm of voice.
And for developers, if they want to get started, either they're brand new to voice or they're coming over from Alexa and Google Assistant, how would you recommend they start with Bixby?
Go to bixbydevelopers.com, download the developer studio and go try it, right? You're gonna the Hello World app is a dice roller. It's like the Hello World app. And go and try that, right? That's what I tried, and I broke it about 5,000 times because that's how I learned. Right, better than reading the documentation, and then learn and be open to the fact that you're not going to jump in. Developers love to jump in and start writing code right away. You got to stop. You got to think of it higher level. You got to model it, and frankly, that's enforcing. I mean, we all know as I've been at an architect role many times in my career, that you should model and think about things ahead of time and do that and write the code and iterate and do that. Bixby definitely forces you because of the nature of it to do some modeling ahead of time. As painful as that may be for some developers, I think you'll admit that it's good for you.
I want to add real quick on that. If you want to learn more about Bixby, get started, or just start with these concepts. If you go to YouTube, search for Samsung Bixby and filter it with the videos that came out in the last month, they put a lot of the content from the Samsung Developer Conference up there with inventors of Siri and Viv. Adam Chayer has some great keynotes up there. You can see Roger in some of these YouTube videos, but go check out the latest Samsung Bixby videos on YouTube. Is one of the best places to come up to speed quickly.
Totally true. There's actually an Adam Chayer kind of intro to Bixby that I don't know if we can put in show notes or something like that. That would be that that would be really helpful, because it probably better than I can articulates the philosophical underpinnings of it, and puts you in the right mindset before you jump in and build something for it.
That sounds good. We'll do that. We'll put that in the show notes. Before we sort of wrap up, then there's a couple of questions that have come through from the listeners. A couple of other questions. John Campbell, who we've had on the podcast very recently, was talking about and asking what sources do Bixby use for location-based search and for music and video and general search. I don't know whether you guys know anything about that.
I don't. That's a really good kind of voice SEO question, and I don't know the answer to that. We'd have to defer to Samsung.
Mm-hmm. And then what about, we spoke quite a lot about the technical side of things. Will the way that Samsung are approaching stuff change the way that designers approach the process of voice design?
I think so, yeah, because it feels more natural for developers to do this without having to be a specialized voice developer or conversation designer. The IDE is something that they might be used to if they're used to some of the Microsoft Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ or other IDE type editors with everything just built in. Yeah, I think it will add a different flavor. I don't know if it's going to change the whole landscape, but it's certainly interesting the way that Samsung rolled Bixby out.
Yeah, I think, and we talked a little bit earlier about could VUI designers understand Bixby. Like I said, I think more than they can, certainly a code driven framework there. And it is worth that there is a kind of a QA capsule in Bixby where you can model some questions and answers and there, which would be definitely attractive to VUI designer. I think that the tool is, at least initially, and hopefully they'll build upon this, offering kind of a tool set that you could share between the actual developer and the VUI designer and get this really collaborative kind of agile way of building. It definitely starts unlocking some of that potential. And that's completely unique from what I've seen.
Yeah, that really is one of the weaknesses perhaps of building for voice today, where everything really has to go through the developer in a lot of ways. The interaction coming in, but also the responses going out. Really need to go through the developers, more or less. But right here, it sounds like Samsung is going to separate that a bit, and like you mentioned, Roger, make that a lot more agile.
That last question, by the way, was from Neha Javalagi of Witlingo, so shout out to Neha. Thank you for that question. Anything else on any other questions, Justin, on Bixby? Have we covered everything in that?
Can I add one more thing that we haven't really talked about? And that's the kind of powerful personalization capabilities that they built into Bixby. This is, so, the idea, to my mind, where assistants should go is they should be very proactive, right? Right now, voice assistants are you have to ask it and then it gives you an answer. It's kind of a Q&A format, right? It's not there's a little bit of personalization. Particularly, Google has some really interesting capabilities there, although they don't fully expose those, to my mind, certainly to third-party developers in Assistant, but proactively understanding what you want to do. Well, Bixby has this whole personalization capabilities around being smarter and asking less. And what I mean by that is being contextually aware. So for instance, if I'm commuting in the morning to work, my questions around, when does the train leave, are obviously around my home station. In the evening, my questions are going to be around, well, it's the station nearest to work. Bixby allows a developer to mark things up to say, hey, start learning the preferences here and start learning the preferences based upon my own actions and or all the actions of everyone who uses this capsule. And then it's also context aware around time and location. That's really powerful capabilities there that right now you could do with the other assistants, but you would have to write a bunch of, use third-party libraries and write a bunch of code, and it probably wouldn't be all integrated in. Bixby enables that. I mean, it's just really in that modeling these things and marking them and say, start learning this, right? Or put this list of options in a particular order, in a personalized order. I'll be honest, I haven't been able to fully explore all of that. And that's kind of in the darker depths of the documentation about how all that stuff works. But it struck me as a really, really powerful capabilities that can make things really interesting, get us closer to just an assistant I don't got to bark at. I just open and it's like, wow, it knew exactly what I wanted, and it did most of it there. And I just have one simple question or one simple request for it.
Let me give you a cool example. With Bixby, you can ask a question, and if it's going to decipher what you asked, and it's going to open up a specific URL. So if I want to say, ask a support question about my oven, about my whatever device, it's going to be able to identify that and open up a page instantly. I think that's a pretty cool capability.
Well, so it'll take you to the web page with that answer on it rather than just giving you a link that you need to go and find.
Yes, exactly.
Huh. Wow.
Open a URL by just ask a specific URL, but just asking a specific question.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
It's pretty incredible the touches that Samsung has put in there to assist in building these capsules. Even I was very impressed. Something as simple as I believe Bixby has the capability for developers to pick a random response without writing extra code. And that's something that every voice developer, the first thing that they do is top of their code, they're going to put a choose random response in there, and it's built right into Bixby. So it shows that they're really caring about their developer experience here as well.
I think what you're saying, Justin, is getting on to, there's a lot of focus on kind of the natural language generation side of the house in Bixby. Whereas I think, I think Google and Amazon have amazing NLU engines and a lot of capabilities there. But if there's anything, every developer for those platforms writes a bunch of code for output, right? And generation and that. Bixby has done some nice little things where you're like, wow, I need your example, right? I want some randomness in there for generation. And there's other little markup things that have done. I really like that. I think if anything in the voice ecosystem, there's a void in the natural language generation part of it, the output side. And we end up writing these crazy Excel spreadsheets with all the possible options and then translate that into the format that your voice assistant needs. Samsung is making some good strides there. I think that's really powerful.
Great. Any other questions on your side, Ken?
I don't think so. I think we've covered all sorts there. Yeah, nothing else from me.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. This has been really fantastic. If people want to reach out and find you, where can they find you? Roger, where can people find you?
Best would be Twitter. So at Roger Kibbe, ROGERKIBBE, or my voice consulting firm, which is VoiceCraft, and that's Roger at voicecraft.ai. Love to interact and with people and understand more questions and answers. And frankly, I'd love to learn. So shoot me your learnings too.
Great. And Bob, where can people find you?
Just browse over to voicexp.com. We've got a chat bot in the bottom right. It blows up my cell phone directly. So just engage with the chat bot, and I'd love to talk to everybody. If we can help your business engage voice, learn about it, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys.
Cheers, both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Roger Kibbe and Bob Stalzberg. So there we go. That was our rundown of Samsung Bixby. I think that it's definitely going to be doing something exciting in this space. They've kind of seemed to be doing a lot of stuff under the radar, and there was a private beta for a long time, and now that they've opened it up for actual developers, and obviously, as we've seen, we've spoke to people who've got under the hood of it, and it does sounds different, but it sounds interesting, things around personalization and some of the stuff that's already built into Bixby around, Dustin was mentioning there around being able to just click a button and have your responses randomized. It's an interesting way of going about it, and I'm interested to see how this all plays out. Don't forget the sheer volume of devices that Samsung have make Bixby a serious contender over the next few years for really starting to take some market share in the voice assistant space. And I'd be interested to hearing from anybody who has a Samsung phone. I think it's only available on the Note 9. I'd be interested in hearing from anybody who has been actually using it from an end user perspective. We spoke a lot about design and development here, but I'm interested in finding out what the experience is like from an end user. So do shoot us a line on Twitter or something like that if you have had experiences of it, because I'd be interested in learning a little bit more. But yeah, thank you, Dustin. Cheers for taking the reins on that one. That was epic. That was a really, really interesting podcast, and thank you, Bob and Roger, for joining us. And as ever, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for listening. Until next time, see you later.